Welcome to Trudge the Road. This week brought to you by livefrogged.com. Firmly relying on God's grace every day. Check out their website. We're your hosts. I'm Rich, a recovered drug addict.
My name is Jerry, and I'm a sober alcoholic.
All right, for this first segment, we want to talk about the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde syndrome. You hear about this all the time in the rooms.
Sure.
What is the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde syndrome?
Anybody who has been affected by the disease of addiction, be they the person themselves or a family member, I think is going to understand this. And it's the book, Robert Louis Stevenson wrote the book, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and I believe it's an autobiography. I really believe he's writing about himself. He was just like us, an alcoholic. And what it means is that Dr. Jekyll, here I am sober, a type of person whom you know and kind of can predict their behavior, but you put alcohol or drugs in me, and I become Mr. Hyde. Here becomes this other, this terrible personality, the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde syndrome. And it applies to all of us, and I'm sure to you, that when you put drugs and alcohol into your system, your behavior changed. It changed significantly and to a very selfish and self-centered type of behavior that is destined to get only what it wants, no matter what. And that's a very scary place. Now, in my particular case of addiction, I really don't think the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde syndrome plays. For me, it's more like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I'll tell you, is that when I would drink or use drugs, you never knew which one of those little guys was going to show up.
You were sort of like Sybil.
Yeah, absolutely.
You had multiple personalities.
Well, the thing is it wasn't as multiple personalities. It was the way that I was acting, and I might be happy, or I might be goofy. But you better watch out if I was grumpy. You never knew which personality was going to show up. I never knew which personality was going to show up. You could kind of make an ascertainment based on how much I was drinking, because happy and goofy may be there for a little while. Sneezy may show up, which of course means cocaine. And then, here comes grumpy and here comes trouble, because when grumpy was there, bad things were going to happen. And that is the significance of the disease and the change in personality that I hope makes a little bit of sense to folks who are suffering from this, or who recognize that loved one of theirs when they do use, and how they drastically change. That's the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde syndrome.
Yeah, I got to tell you, when I was using, I don't know that I got grumpy. Again, for those of you that have not heard the program before, I'm a speed freak. I was crystal meth and cocaine. It's what I did. And when I was high, I was up, I was trying to engage, I was tucky, I was all of those things until I started coming down.
There comes problem.
When I started running out of dope, and we have talked about that syndrome before, the anxiety portion of your high is when you're starting to run out of dope. And I would become downright unbearable and miserable, just a person you would not want to look at, be around, deal with in any sense of the imagination. But as soon as I scored, as soon as I got, or I shouldn't even say that.
Even before you used it.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
If I called the dealer and he said, come on over, I've got it, instantly I would change. I was a horrible guy. It's funny because it reminds me of a story that you told me one time ago about how you were going somewhere.
Vegas.
And you found some coke in your pocket.
It was here. I'll share real quick.
Okay.
I was working in sports at the time in the Western Athletic Conference, and years and years and years ago. And we had to go to UNLV for a game. And I remember the girl I was dating at the time and I decided we were going to get a little cocaine. And we went by the cocaine dealer's house. And we said, well, we'll just do a little, just do a little. That was about 8 o'clock in the evening. I got a plane that leaves at 7 o'clock in the morning. We're still sitting there at 5 in the morning doing all this cocaine, and now it is gone, all right? And I got to go. And I'm okay for a moment because I got a lot of cocaine and alcohol in me. But I get on that plane and we start, get about halfway to Vegas, and I'm coming down. And when I come down, I am miserable. I am anxious. I am mean. I have no patience. It's awful. It is awful. And we got to the stadium, and these were guys I would see every week, other broadcasters. And I'm a pretty nice fella, easy to get along with, kind of funny. And whoa, don't get near me now. Don't get. I was so angry. And coming off this and just wanted more. I wanted more cocaine. I needed some more alcohol. Somehow I'm going to have to get it. And that night, while we were in this process, the person who I was buying drugs from realized there's going to be a problem for me the next day. And what she did is she put a gram of cocaine in the pocket of my coat. and this is in the late 70s. Airport security wasn't what it was today. And I was smoking, and I reached in there to find a match or a lighter in my pocket, and my hand touched that cocaine. It just touched it, and all of a sudden, everything changed. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Now, I haven't done it. I'm not even 100% sure that's what it is. But I pull it out, and I see it, and all of a sudden, just like that, instantaneously, I'm the nicest guy you've ever seen. I'm thrilled. I'm excited. Complete change in behavior right in front of these people who are going, what is going on with him? That's how powerful it is.
And I think there's not one person that isn't in a state of addiction or hasn't been in addiction that doesn't understand completely that story you just told.
Absolutely. And, I'm just going to be the truth of the matter, and I'm going to ask you to verify this, that now you've never seen me drunk or loaded, but you would probably describe me as easygoing, helpful, kind, pretty nice fella. I don't want to be like I'm, pretentious or anything of that nature, but.
Well, it is somewhat pretentious, but yes, you are.
Well, the fact of the matter is, if you put drugs or alcohol in me, that nice, easygoing guy instantly becomes capable of murder. That is absolutely true. With drugs and alcohol in me, I am capable. If you have to go, you have to go. If I get what I have to get. That's how serious it is. And I'm not, that sounds like I'm trying to frighten you or to exaggerate a behavior, but I am not. That is exactly what happens, and that's how serious it is.
It's addiction survivalist mode, and when we are running out of whatever we're desiring, we fall into this sort of survival mode, and anyone in our way becomes an obstacle that we are just going to blow right by.
Exactly, as Dr. Troncalli describes the lizard brain, and we're down to those three basic emotions now. Three basic emotions: elation, anxiety, and despair. And it's simply this: we got the dope. That feeling, I touched the dope. Elation. I'm starting to run out. Here comes anxiety. It's gone. Despair. The only thing that cures despair is that elation, and that's the cycle that we get into. 1, 2, 3, and that's how we exist.
Well, this is a great discussion for family members right now that might be living with someone who has an addictive personality or someone that's currently going through addiction, and you're trying to understand why this person goes through this Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde sort of personality. It's not you. I know a lot of people think, well, it's got to be me. He's acting this way. It's my fault. It's not your fault.
No, it's the pathology of the disease of addiction. Addiction is no different than any other fatal disease. It has its own pathology. What makes ours unique is the ramifications of the behavior. The behavior is what is the ill part, if you will, the part that shows, and the part is so confusing, and the part is so damaging. And that's what makes this really the most detrimental disease that you can possibly have, is the disease of addiction, because it just encompasses everybody who you encounter. Anybody who comes into your life, even on the peripheral level, is going to be affected by your behavior, because at this point, and as you put it, survivalist mode. We will do what we have to do regardless of what the consequences are to get what we want, because we need it. We absolutely have to have that to survive. Our brain, and this is something that's very important for people who aren't addicted, when we're out of that drug, our brain is telling us, if you don't get that drug, you are going to die. That's what addiction is. That's what is happening to us when we're coming off of those drugs. It's the awful feeling, the sickness, things of that nature. But the clear message we're getting is, if you don't get more, you are going to die. There's no way that you can argue with this overwhelming desire, this overwhelming passion, this overwhelming demand that you use drugs will not leave you. It will not leave you. It's a horrifying place to be, and that's part of the pathology.
And it's a horrifying place for that family member that's trying to figure out what the heck is going on with this guy. You were just being nice to me a minute ago.
Right.
And now all of a sudden you've changed, and now you've changed back. Can you pick a personality and stick with it? So the question is, for the family member that might be seeing this going on right now in their life, what is the path of that they should take to try to find some resolution to this current situation?
Dr. Troncalli talks about that in depth, and it's really important to pay attention to it. And he's going to give you some lessons on detachment and how you are going to be able to save yourself. You don't have to die or suffer from this disease just because you've got a spouse or a close loved one who's got it. And to do that, the lesson that you need is to go to where people understand your pain. And they understand your pain, and it's significant pain, in the rooms of Al-Anon. At the rooms of Al-Anon, they have a plan. They have a support group. They have a mechanism of behavior that you can adapt to your life, which will free you of the burden that you have because you love somebody who has this disease.
And you can't just walk up. I'll tell you, when I was going through this Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing, you could not come up to me and say, why are you acting that way? It's because you're using or you're trying to get high or any of that, because I would deny that. I would completely deflect that. What are you talking about? It's because of such and such and such and such. It was a deflection of personal responsibility. I mean,
Absolutely.
You could not say anything to me without me deflecting it and resolving myself of any personal responsibility.
The insanity of that is when you're telling those lies, you believe them. You know, you could put me, as I said, on a great lie detector machine, and it would come out the truth, even though it is a lie that everybody in the room knows is a lie.
And I would personally attack you as well.
Oh, yeah.
I'd make it your fault.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
You know why I'm angry? Because of you.
And we are experts at that. And again, whether that's learned behavior or part of the pathology, I really don't know. But we are masters of manipulation, and we can make you feel and act the way we want because, frankly, that's what we do for a living at this point.
Isn't that step 6? Step 6 is I became entirely ready to defend, excuse, and justify my actions using personal attacks on others if necessary, and to minimize any mistake I may make.
Oh, man. That's
the anti-6 step.
It is, but boy, does it play applicable towards me. There is no question about that.
Yeah, you definitely have to know inside your head when you're faced with this situation, it is not you.
No.
It is the behavior of the addicted person. They're the ones that are going through this, not you, and it's nothing you did to get this rise out of them as well.
Let me use the analogy that I think is, you know, if you're in recovery and you're wondering what is happening to you and what is going to happen to you through this process, it's real scary. It's scary for everybody, but I'll tell you exactly what's happening to you. You know who the artist Michelangelo is.
Sure.
The Sistine Chapel.
He's not the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle.
No, not that one. Not that one.
Just checking.
The artist, Michelangelo, created the statue of David, arguably the most precious piece of sculpted art that lives in the world, that exists in the world. When Michelangelo finished the statue of David, people then were just as amazed when they saw it as they are now. And they said to him, "How did you create the statue of David?" And Michelangelo responded, "I didn't. I just chipped away everything that wasn't David, and there he was." And that's what we do in the rooms of AA. That is the 12 steps. We chip away everything that you are not so that we can discover that beautiful spiritual being that you are.
We'd like to thank our sponsor here today, which is livefrogged.com, LIVEFROGGED. You're looking at my shirt because I'm wearing
it. You got
one.
one. It's pretty cool. I'd like to get one myself.
Yeah, it says live. Well, you can. You just got to go to their website,
livefrog.com. What great people. Brian and family, thank you. God bless you so very much.
Yeah, beautiful family and a great message as well. We are Rich and Jerry, and this is Trudge the Road.
You're listening to Trudge the Road. Coming up, Dr. Joe talks with Jerry about how to identify the addicted person. And then Rich and Jerry will discuss benefits and gratitude on the Trudge the Road Radio Network.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Trudge the Road. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much to our new affiliates. Just if you're tuning in, let me tell you real quick, Trudge the Road is an hour-long program dedicated to people who suffer from the disease of addiction to drugs and alcohol, and ever as important, their families and friends. And with me is our professional guest, as always, Dr. Joseph Troncalli. Dr. Joe, thank you very much for being here.
Absolutely a pleasure.
It's a wonder to have you here. Thank you so much. You're one of the few people who can really explain this extremely complicated disease. And the first question I have for you, and I think that so many who may or who are listening, is how do you identify addiction?
That's a great question. I think that there are certain criteria that the psychiatrists and the DSM-4 and all these sorts of technical sorts of people will try to use to identify addiction. And the main sorts of things that we look for in people that have addiction is the ability for people to try to cut back, but they can't. They also are people who develop tolerance to the drugs. They're also people who have tried to do things in their life but have been unsuccessful because of drugs and alcohol. There's about 7 criteria, and I'm not going to bore the audience with the exact criteria, but the main thing is that people with the disease of addiction basically lose control over the compulsion towards the use of drugs and alcohol, and that in and of itself has a tremendous negative effect on their life and the lives of the people that they love.
Now, in my own addiction, and I recall distinctly trying to moderate, trying to cut down, having rules like only 3 after 7 o'clock, and of course it never worked, but the intentions were good, you know.
Absolutely. Every addict that I know, at least, doesn't want to be an addict. And they all have the belief that at some level they can control their addiction, which is the whole disease, in that you can't control it.
Well, is there any way to prevent it, or the addiction or its consequences?
Again, one of the things that it would be great if we could do would be to identify all the people who have the genetic predisposition for addiction. One of the things that I always want to do in patients that I treat is to find out whether or not there's any family members who are also addicts. And there's a specific genetic loading that people have. If you have 2 parents who are addicts, you have about a 50-50 chance of becoming an addict yourself. And so if you know right off that there's addiction in your family, that gives you a pretty good indication that you probably should be abstinent. That's not very easy to tell to somebody who's 16 years old and who doesn't think that anything's going to hurt them, much less drugs or alcohol, or think that far down the road. But if you can educate people and educate families, for instance, if people are in recovery and they know that they are addicts, it's important for them to impart to their children, look, you've got some sort of genetic predisposition to have something happen to you if you start to use drugs or alcohol. And I think that it's very important for us to try to educate people. I know that Betty Ford has a great series for children that is part of their curriculum for the children of addicts. And they try their very best to teach people about this whole phenomenon of the genetic predisposition.
And it does not necessarily affect everyone in the family. I'll give myself as an example. My family, there is addiction a mile wide, and long ago. There's no question about that. Now my daughter, fortunately, and I was absolutely prepared at a young age to deal with her as soon as it happened, because I thought, I know the genetic pool she's swimming in,
right?
You know, but yet it did not. And I thank God every day on my knees. It's the biggest miracle in my life that she does not have the disease.
Well, and as I said, even if you have 2 parents who are addicts, the statistical probability for you becoming an addict yourself is 50-50. So there is 50-50 chance that you're going to dodge that genetic bullet. But again, there's no way of knowing, at least that we know of right now, to be able to predict that from a blood test or something like that.
So in a sense, and correct me if I'm wrong, are we somewhat of a time bomb, just clicking, waiting to go off?
Yes, and it's even more complicated than that, because let's say that you have a child who has the predisposition for being an alcoholic addict. There is still a little egg timer in people's heads that goes off at different times, and we have no way of predicting that either. So some people can be social drinkers for 10 or 20 years and never exhibit addiction. And then all of a sudden one day they start hiding bottles in a closet, or they start overusing their prescription medicines, or whatever they do. Now, some people get it right away. In other words, some 14-year-olds, as soon as they start drinking, they're basically alcoholics from almost day one. But there's all this other group that can go for years, or
which is the majority,
decades.
I would say, wouldn't you?
Well, I think that the statistics show that most people identify as addicted by the time they're in their early 20s. And so if you looked at a bell-shaped curve, what you would see is that there's about 50% of people who identify themselves as addicted, or they may not identify, but they are addicts by the time they're in their early 20s. But then the other 50% sort of tail off, and they identify themselves as addicts farther down the road.
All right, now using me as an example, and you know me, and it was bad, but taking you to this, and I will not exaggerate, the very first time that alcohol worked for me, and at the time I was 12 and a half, 13 years old, with a family who was in the liquor business, the wholesale liquor business. So, I had access. But, and I'm telling the truth, Doc, when, some of my friends got the booze and they got giggly and happy and, as you would expect. And I swear to you, I just got okay. For the very first time in my life, I wasn't terrified about what happened yesterday and petrified about what's going on tomorrow. I was just okay. And I know that you understand that, and it's impossible for me to explain that to other people. But you were never going to take that feeling away from me again. The fear was gone. I was all right. In every aspect of my life, all of a sudden, my brothers weren't a problem. And, that house we lived in wasn't so bad. And it worked. It was an experience that I can recall as I'm speaking to you right now, and there is euphoria as I speak.
Absolutely. And the business of people having that experience is also quite a sort of a dangerous experience, because as soon as you have that experience, you're basically hooked. And it's more than just being hooked in the sense of what we've been talking about over previous shows, where there's changes in your brain and that sort of thing. What you got was something that nothing else could give you.
Right.
And that's sort of, again, we've talked about this before too, that there's sort of a magic that goes along for certain people when they have their first drink or when they have their first pill. They say, I feel normal.
Right.
And that's a very scary thing, because that means that you have to have a mood altering substance to feel normal. And I'm not denying that at all. I think that that's a very real experience. I've talked to thousands of addicts, and many of them tell me that exact story. Now, that's not true for everyone. There's a whole bunch of people who are addicted, and they basically drank or partied or did whatever they did socially, and then it just sort of crept up on them, and all of a sudden they started acting differently. And so that's sort of a different subset that we're talking about. So the people that you're talking about, like yourself, are these people that are kind of the instant addict.
Right.
And basically all you had to do was add the substance and you had addiction. There's other people that continually sort of add the substance over a period of months, years, decades, and then they find themselves compulsively using.
I'm gonna bodily, mentally. I know that the text tells me I'm different, but I will tell you this: that in my late teens, early 20s, when drinking, I would drink 4 times as much as anybody else and be the only one who was not drunk. And people who have this disease know exactly what I'm talking about. Why is that?
Well, again, people with the predisposition for addiction basically have this huge tolerance that they both build up over time, but they also have some sort of an innate tolerance. And again, those are people that are sort of in trouble from the get-go. Those people that have difficulty getting drunk, but they know that they really enjoy the use of alcohol, are people that are setups for problems down the road, because, in other words, your body's only able, your brain can tolerate the alcohol, but your body really can't tolerate the alcohol for long periods of time. So in the end, your liver's going to go, or something bad's going to start happening to you if you don't have bad things happen to you for behavioral consequences like getting put in jail or those sorts of things. But what happens is the whole thing of developing tolerance is one of the criteria for addiction.
So, in reality, the behavior issue is what saved my life, because that's what stopped me, and I wasn't that old at that time to have continued and suffered, obviously the liver, the heart, the things of that nature.
Well, that's what we tell addicts all the time. Either you stop drinking or drugging, or you're going to be in jail, in an institution, or dead.
It's 1, 2, 3.
Right. And so there's really no way around that unless you stop. And that's why we're here on the radio, I hope, to try to find people who are out there who are very close to the brink, whatever that is. You might be feeling suicidal right now. You might feel like it's hopeless. You can't get any help, all that sort of stuff. I'm here to tell you that there is hope and that you can get help. And that's why we believe in 12-step recovery. That's why we want to try to get you to people who can help you. It's not a hopeless disease. It's a treatable disease. It's just you have to recognize it and recognize that you've got to get the help that you need.
Absolutely. And it does work. And I'm living proof of that here. You can go to our website, recoveryforlifechannel.com, and find out if there's an AA or NA meeting close to you or a number you can call to get some immediate help. When we come back with Dr. Joe here in a few minutes, what do you tell a family member about their addiction and the consequences that may come from that? So stay with us. That'll be some very valuable information here on Trudge the Road. Thank you very much. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Trudge the Road, trudging the road to happy destiny. And it is brought to you this week by livefrogged.com. That's LIVEFROGGED, which stands for Firmly Relying on God's Grace Every Day. I'm wearing one of their t-shirts today. They are smart-looking t-shirts. They help out a great cause as well, which is victims of breast cancer. And they're great people that have this website. So if you get a chance, I ordered one for me and my wife.
Good. I'm going to get one for me. I'll tell you, it's a cool shirt.
Yeah, and we should get one for Matt.
Absolutely. Matt, the producer, give him a round of applause there.
Matt, the producer. So if you get a chance, check out livefrogged.com. And this segment, we want to talk about benefits. And I'm not talking about benefits from your job. I'm talking about benefits, the benefits of getting sober.
Of living within the AA culture.
Sure.
If you will, let me go back, and say this, that what is part of the pathology of this disease is we get our wants and our needs confused. I'm never going to be happy until I get what I want. Never, ever grateful to have all the things we need, and so much on top of that. In my own life, I achieved the American dream. We had the 3-bedroom rancher with a single-car garage and a Toyota in the driveway and a couple of bucks in the bank and a park down the street. And isn't that the American dream? That's the American dream? Not when I was not drinking, it wasn't. That house, that was junk. I didn't want a 3-bedroom rancher in the burbs. I wanted a 9-bedroom mansion on the beach. And that Toyota in the parking lot, or in the driveway, forget that, man. I wanted a Ferrari. And this neighborhood, come on, man, I want all that. If I get all that I want, then I'm going to be happy. Never realizing that the American dream was in my hands. Now, if you put alcohol or drugs in me for a minute, I would be completely content with that. Everything would be just great. But as we know about alcohol and drugs, once I start, I can't stop. And once I start, as we had in the last segment, the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde syndrome, it begins, I change and become a very dangerous type of a person. Part of getting benefits of recovery is that changes. That absolutely changes. And we get what we call in the rooms an attitude of gratitude. I'm just grateful for the things that I have. Now, by the time I got fully into the rooms and surrendered, the American dream, I assure you, was gone. As you know, I was either living in a tree at 4th and Oak in Louisville, Kentucky, or an old beat-up Mercury that was behind the Ice House, which is an AA clubhouse. When the weather was bad, they'd let me sleep back in that car. That was a far distance from the American dream. But once I realized that, I became grateful for everything I had. I became grateful for the fact that I was eating today. I was grateful for the fact I had bus money. I was grateful for the meeting. I was grateful for my friends. And I had nothing. And from that, this dramatic change began to take place. And I give complete credit to the culture of Alcoholics Anonymous as well as to the 12 steps and the benefits that I've received from that. Let me give you an example. My daughter, Chelsea, does not have this disease, which is amazing considering I know the genetic pool that she's swimming in.
Sure.
You know Chelsea, and you would describe her as probably
very cool.
Very cool, just laid back, wonderful person. And I was speaking at an AA conference in North Carolina, and there was a lot of people there, and Chelsea was there with me. Let me go back a second and tell you this. Chelsea grew up in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. When she was with me, she was going to AA meetings because that's where Daddy went. Daddy had to go. And she came along and spent years going. She loved going to meetings and loved the people because it is love. AA is love. And anyway, I'm about to speak at this conference, and gee, there's a lot of people. I was very, very nervous. And she was with me, and she's trying to calm me down a little bit. And I looked at her, and I thought, how did this happen? After me being anything but the example of a father, me with this incredible genetic predisposition. And I looked at her and I said, how? How did you turn out to be, and I'll use your word, this laid-back, sympathetic, kind person? And she looked at me like I was crazy. And she just took her hand and she pointed into the room where all of those people I was about to speak to were sitting. She pointed at them and she said, that's how. That's why. I grew up in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Daddy, do you think I was just sitting there coloring? I picked up on this. I didn't even realize that. That had never even crossed my mind until that point, that she had picked up so much from these wonderful people. How can I ever pay that back? And I've got that beautiful daughter who understands. She understands us. She understands our pain. She understands our journey. That is a benefit that is just absolutely indescribable. So many other wonderful things have happened, and so many of them by accident. And this is a little story, if I could, about anonymity.
Sure.
When I got sober, my career in broadcasting was washed up, and that was okay. I was all right with that. I deserved that. I was the one who did the destruction, and I'd begun a new career as a social worker at the time. But by the grace of some people, they had given me a part-time job at one of the radio stations. This is in Louisville, Kentucky, and I'm going to put the year. I think it was 1996. I'm not quite sure. Right around that time period. And this radio station was putting on a massive rock concert, which radio stations do. And again, I worked part-time there. And I got a call from the operations manager, Cece, a great guy, who called me up and said, "Hey, Jer, are you still in that AAA thing?" And I said, I sure am. I said, "We'll get you sober and change your tire, baby." And he goes, "Look, this concert's coming in, and somebody it was the lighting crew or the sound crew, I couldn't remember, was an alcoholic in recovery and wanted to go to a meeting. Could I help get them to a meeting?" And of course, when another alcoholic reaches out for help, it is my responsibility. And I said, absolutely. And so he gave me the information, and I called this guy, and I said, what meeting, what's your time frame? And it was a Friday afternoon. And there was one meeting that we could get to that would work out. It was the 3:00 meeting at the Token Club, Louisville, Kentucky. Love that place. Don't think I'd be sober without it. And I don't mean to be disrespectful in what I'm saying, but the sociology of that particular meeting was folks who were kind of retired, black belt AA, but older folks.
Right.
I shouldn't be saying that now because I'm in that demographic now. And I told him that, he's a young guy, obviously, on the phone. He goes, "No problem whatsoever. I need the meeting." So I said, "All right, it's at 3:00. I'll pick you up at the venue at 2:15. Wonderful. And this is the days, but when cell phones were, nobody had one, or a few people had them. And I remember the radio station let me use the cell phone to go out because I had to call him when I got to the venue. And I got out there and I called him, and he said, "Come on up to the front door." And I did, and met him, really nice guy. And he says to me, he goes, "Look, is there room in the car for one more?" And I, absolutely, there's room. And he goes, "I'll be back in a minute." And I waited and waited. It was kind of a long period of time. And then the door opens, and he walks out. And with him is one of the biggest rock stars in the world. Just standing there looking at me. And I went into shock. I didn't know what to say. And this is what he said to me. He goes, "Is it cool if I tag along?"
Well, let me ask you something.
Here's my response was, "Okay."
Did he say, "Is it cool, mate?"
You're trying to find it out. See,
I'm just curious.
All right, so this is what happened. Now I got to tell you, the car I had, the car had a name, the Alcoholic Hippie Social Worker Mobile. It was this old Toyota station wagon. I don't even remember it was a $200 car I was making payments on. I'll put it that way. And I can only imagine this rock star riding in limousines with police escorts. That's how big he is. And climbs into the back of this beat-up alcoholic hippie social worker mobile to head off to the AA meeting. I'm literally in shock. I cannot believe that this is happening.
Are you moving the McDonald's bags?
The crap's out of the back, and it was just, I'd have spruced it up if I'd have known, And so, it takes a few minutes as we're driving, and they're asking the typical Louisville questions. Where's Churchill Downs? Where do they make the whiskey? Things of that nature. And I'm trying to answer those and still realize what is going on with me. And I'm beginning to go, oh, my God, this is one of the biggest things that's ever happened in my life. I have got one of the biggest rock stars in the world in my car, and we're going to the Token 3 Club. Oh! I was so excited. We get to the club, and it's about 2:45, and we walk in, and the usual crowd is there, and I'm beaming. Look who I've got. And we walk in, and nobody recognizes him. It's just killing me.
Because they're older.
They're a little bit older, and the fact they're just not looking for it, Plus, he didn't look any different than you and me, it's an AA meeting. And it was driving me so crazy. It was a round robin, and when it was my turn to share, I swear to God, I was using lyrics from his song to try and incorporate it in there, and nobody picked up on it, So the meeting ended, and we go back down to the car, and get in and drive back to this venue, and they get out of the car, and this is the last thing he says to me. He reaches into his pocket and goes, "Can I give you a couple of bucks for gas?" And I said, "No, man, I've got it." And end of story. Off they go. But this has happened to me, and I'm out of my mind. And the first person I call is Burns, my sponsor. "You're not going to believe it. You're not going to believe it. You'll never guess who I just took to an AA meeting." And I told him, and he said, "You stop right there." He goes, "You just told the last person on earth that you took that man to an AA meeting." And I said, "Why?" Anonymity. We go to these meetings anonymously. And I thought, well, that doesn't apply here. And he said, "Take a look, Jerry, at what extent they went to get him to the meeting." You see, he was the one who wanted to go to the meeting, not the guy from the sound and light crew. They just knew you. They knew who you were. And if they'd have called up and said, "Hey, would you take this major rock star to a meeting?" You'd have told everybody in Kentucky. There'd have been 5,000 people there because you couldn't keep your mouth shut, And I said, well, maybe a couple hundred people. But and so they did this elaborate scam, if you will, so that this man could anonymously go to this meeting and get what you needed and what he needed, and that is an hour of recovery, and to do so by being just who he is and not who we may as sociologically look at him. And you can't tell anybody, ever. And you got to be kidding me. This is one of the biggest events in my life. And what he says to me, it absolutely is one of the biggest events in your life, and it was just for you. And this is how God, as I choose to understand him, works. It's a little quirky. I'm gonna give you something, Jer. You've been working really hard. I'm gonna give you a big thrill, But God, with his little twisted sense of humor, always throws that little caveat in there that makes it him, that makes it able for me to tell this story. And I'm looking at you and I'm looking at Matt, and you both got that like, who is it look on you.
Right.
And I'm never gonna say it's just for me. And what an experience. And that's anonymity. That's respect. And what a great gift God gave me that day.
And it's gratitude as well. But I do have one question on that story. At the very end, when he said, "Can I give you a couple of bucks?" Did he say, "Can I give you a couple of bucks, mate?" Or did he just say, "Can I give you?" Or did he say, "Hey, mate, can I give you?" I mean, from where was he from? I'm kidding. I won't push you on that. Okay. But I think it's a great story, and it's a great story about gratitude as well, because you're very grateful for the ability for that to have happened to you.
That's a thrill, and that's a gift, from God, a little gift from God. What is the big gift is my daughter. And that day that, when I asked, why are you such a wonderful person? And she points right into the room, 1,500 alcoholics sober, sitting in that room of Alcoholics Anonymous. Daddy, that's why I am the person I am. It's because of people, those people, the people who are in recovery. It's miraculous. It's the most beautiful experience that you can possibly imagine on earth. Getting sober, feeling that love, making that attachment, and realizing that this spiritual journey via these 12 steps is available to any one of us who wants it. And if you're a person out there who has an addicted loved one, there's a program for you too. It's Al-Anon. This is a family disease. One person can't just get it. One person can't just get it. It spreads through the entire family. And further than that, at the workplace, with friends, you become overwhelmed with this behavior and don't know what to do. Don't worry about not knowing what to do. Know that you need to take care of yourself. Al-Anon is the place that you need to go. And you'll find the same love, the same direction, the same support, the same protection that we find in AA and in NA. And you can ultimately find what you're looking for, and that's some peace of mind.
And one of the cool things is it's free. Check out our sponsor. Well, I was just looking for a great way to wrap it up. But it's free.
That's what it is, free.
You can't say, "Wow, man, I don't have a ticket for that." You don't need a ticket.
You don't, man.
All you need to do is find your way down there. And it's funny because I can remember when I had first got sober and somebody said to me, I said, "Well, the meeting place is 3 miles and I don't have a car anymore." They said, well, you'd find a way if there was dope 3 miles away to get there.
Right.
You can find a way to get to a meeting if you're really that serious about your sobriety.
Let me tell you about my friend Lee. I was working in a treatment center. This, again, was in Kentucky, and it was a very expensive treatment center to get into. If you had insurance, they'd do their best. But Lee was a guy who saw our commercial on television, and he lived over on the west side of Louisville, and he was done, and he needed help, and he saw that commercial, and that's all he was going to respond to, and he didn't have bus money, and he walked from basically the west side of Louisville to the east side. I'm telling you, that's a long, long way, and came into that treatment center, beat up from the heat of the street, beat up from the disease that he has, and at the end, and said, would you please help me? Would you please help me? And he didn't have the money that was necessary or the insurance to get in. But we saw in him that true desire. He trudged that road to that treatment center. He trudged a nasty road because he was looking for a happy destiny, and he thought maybe we could offer it. And I'll never forget when the director of that program said, let him in here. Let him in here. We'll let the price go. This guy's got to get treatment. That's God. That's God doing for us what we cannot do for ourselves. Was that a wonderful gesture on behalf of the treatment center director? Absolutely. But why did it really happen? Because God said so. Because God said so. And I know that in my life there is a power greater than myself that can do anything if my motives and the work that I'm going to do are legitimate and on a path to a happy destiny. That's what happened to Lee that day, and that's what God did for him, did for me, did for you, and did for everybody in Alcoholics Anonymous, and will do, I promise, for anybody out there who is addicted right now, who is in their cups, who is desperate, or that family member who doesn't know what to do. You'll find more information about where you can go from our website, which is recoveryforlifechannel.com. recoveryforlifechannel.com. Go there. Find peace, find people, find where the answers are, and thank you very much for listening to Trudge the Road, because we're doing the best we can.
You can also find our email addresses on there as well, recoveryforlifechannel.com. Jerry and I, you can get a hold of us. You can get a hold of Matt, our producer. Maybe there's something technically you didn't care for in that last segment. Dr. Joe as well. This is Trudge the Road.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Trudge the Road. My name is Jerry. I am a sober alcoholic. Trudge the Road is a radio program dedicated to people who suffer from the disease of addiction, addicted to drugs and alcohol, and every bit as important, family members and friends. And with me, and I hope you caught the first part of the show here with Dr. Joe Troncalli. Thank you very much, Dr. Joe. Dr. Joe is not addicted. He is a doctor who has a sincere wish to help us, and we appreciate that from the bottom of our hearts. As we continue with some questions, if you would, Dr. Troncalli, as a physician, what do you tell a family member about their addicted relative?
That's a great question. The context is very important. A lot of people who have addicted relatives have already either tried to get them help or know that there's a problem but don't know what to do and that sort of thing. And so the first thing that we need to do as helper healer types is to try to find out what it is that's going on before. In other words, some people have a very clear history of helping other relatives who have had addiction, and they understand addiction pretty well and that sort of thing. And so that's one sort of a scenario. But there's lots of people who come in and they're very much blindsided by the problem of addiction in their relative or their family member. And so with those people, what we have to do, first of all, is to try to kind of detoxify the family member. And just like we detoxify alcoholics and try to get them to a place where they can begin to hear, we have to do the same thing for people who have relatives or spouses who are alcoholic, because these people are hurting in much the same way that the alcoholic or addict is hurting, only kind of from a different perspective. These people have lost all their money. These people have tried to help in ways that hasn't worked for them or for the alcoholic, all those sorts of things. And so one of the things that we have to do for people that are family members is to begin to help them to know that we understand where they're coming from and that they're hurting. So we gain their trust. once we gain their trust, then the next step is to begin to try to teach them about the disease of alcoholism. We try to help them understand that their alcoholic addict, relative, friend, spouse, whatever, is not someone who is in control of their behavior when they're under the influence. We have to get them to understand that this is something that is genetic. It is a disease. It is something that they are out of control. Both the addict alcoholic is out of control, and the person that I'm talking to is basically not able to control this alcoholic or addict.
So everyone needs treatment is what you're saying.
Absolutely. It's totally a family disease. And if you don't treat the whole family, you're really not going to get very far. And in fact, sometimes the addict's spouse or relative is even sicker, if that's a good word to describe this whole process, because when the alcoholic begins to do the right thing, the codependent spouse or the person who is, quote, trying to help the person is so addicted to helping that they will continue to do this pathological sort of helping to the detriment of the alcoholic. And so it's very important for us to help people get into Al-Anon, for instance, just so that they can understand they don't control it, they can't cure it, and that this is some process that they're going to have to basically let go of to begin to help the person with the addiction.
And that detachment is not an easy thing to do.
It's very, very, very counterintuitive.
And first, I want you to tell people, explain that counterintuitive, and then if you would, if we could talk about what is treatment and what am I going to get and what are they going to do for me. But the counterintuitive thing I think is very important.
Well, this is the best way that I can explain counterintuitive behavior, and that is whatever feels right to you is probably the wrong thing to do.
That's the story, my story, right there.
And so everybody thinks they're helping an alcoholic by, for instance, bailing them out or giving them money or trying to make excuses for them, whatever. And that is exactly the wrong thing to do to try to help someone. Now, again, it's so complicated because it's so ingrained. If this pattern has been going on for years, then it's very difficult to get people to, first of all, even see the fact that what they're doing is detrimental to the alcoholic. And it's also difficult for the alcoholic addict to understand what the heck is going on in terms of, like, why aren't you doing what you've always done?
The word enabling, I'll bring that up. Enabling is to give someone the opportunity to do something. And that is what we are, with the best of intentions, of course.
Absolutely. Again, nobody's a good or a bad player in this scene. In other words, there's not a lot of malevolence in this. This is stuff that is just a process. And it's really important to try to teach both the alcoholic addict and the relatives, friends, and spouses that this is not about right or wrong. It's not about good and bad. It's just about that you're playing this game that you're not even aware of. You don't even know you're in the game. And what's happening is that you're doing these patterns of behavior that continue to keep people doing the same sorts of things. And that might be coming from the alcoholic addict, or it might be coming from the spouse or the relatives.
As a social worker working in the treatment environment, it was very obvious to me because the alcoholic, we get them into treatment and in a few weeks, even a few days, there's improvement. They get better, and it's really pretty rapid. Then you deal with the family, and you know what I'm talking about when I say the look. You know, when they come in with that stare and that fear and that afraid to hope, and it's tragic to look at them, and it's very difficult to deal with that.
Absolutely. And if you ever read any Tom Fogarty, who's a psychiatrist, one of the things that he used to talk about with family systems and family processes is that it's very difficult to get families in crisis in the same time warp. So an alcoholic may be sobering up, and they're basically looking forward, for instance, to staying sober. The family is still stuck in the fear and the complete paralyzation, or whatever you want to call it. They're paralyzed by the fact that this person could relapse at any time. And so one of the things that we used to see all the time when we would do family sorts of meetings with alcoholic addicts and their spouses or relatives was that it was very, very, very difficult to get people in the same time warp because everybody was operating in a different time frame in their head. The family was afraid. The alcoholic was trying to be hopeful. then what would happen is somebody would throw a monkey wrench into the whole thing and talk about something that happened in the past, and then everybody would be back in the past fighting the same battles again. And so this whole counterintuitive thing is partly too about trying to get everybody on the same page, which is extremely difficult because everybody is, like I said, operating in their own time frame. And so a good therapist or somebody that's doing if you look at AA, for instance, what do they always talk about? Just for what? Today.
Right.
And so again, that is so profound because what it's doing is it's basically trying to get everybody in the same time warp. Even though people don't really realize it as that, what it's doing is it's doing what therapists have a really hard time doing, which is to get everybody into today because it's all you got. Yesterday is gone. Tomorrow hasn't happened yet. And so what we're trying to do is help people, both the addicts and the spouses and the loved ones, get just talking about what can we do today, both for themselves and for the other person. In other words, in Al-Anon, what we're trying to teach people is look, don't try to change the alcoholic or the addict. It's an impossibility. But what you can do is change yourself and your own behavior, and you can stop being anxious about whatever happened in the past. Now, that might sound very simplistic, but it's essential for people to do the right thing going forward. The same thing's true for the alcoholic. If the alcoholic starts living in the past, starts projecting towards the future, they're dead.
Yeah.
But they have to stay in the present time. That's why 12-step recovery is such a wonderful and a magical thing.
It does work. I'm going to give you an example here about how we impact the families. When my daughter got married, when Chelsea got married, I was sober almost 19 years. Now, her grandparents, of course, my ex-in-laws, had to endure the wrath at the end of my drinking and drug use, and it was horrifying. And they did what they could until they had to detach. I'm so happy to say that amends have been made and a relationship is reestablished, and I think they're the most wonderful people in the world, and I love them dearly. All right, now Chelsea's getting married. I'm sober all this time. It's the rehearsal dinner the night before the wedding, and I show up there, and the lady, as I was coming into the room, she says, "What would you like to drink?" And I said, "A ginger ale, please." And she gave me ginger ale, but she gave it to me in a highball type glass. Mm-hmm. And I walked into that room where they were with that in my hand, and I saw these people go into shock. Their faces, they just, you could see it all come right back. 18, almost 19 years had gone by. They saw me with what appeared to be a cocktail in my hand, and it was unbelievable to see the look on their faces.
And see, this is what we were talking about before with the lizard brain or whatever you want to talk about in terms of the limbic system as part of the disease. In other words, people do not forget these memories. Those memories come back just instantaneously.
Instantly.
Yeah, and you're living 18 years in the past instantly. And so all of these triggers that we talk about for people, whether you're an addict and alcoholic, that's why, again, back to good old 12-step recovery, people,
right,
places, and things. As soon as you get people into the old people, places, and things, the thing in your situation was a highball glass.
Right.
You know, and all that was all that it took for everybody to get triggered.
Oh, just instantly. I've never seen anything like it in my life. It was a flashback to that day 19 years ago.
Absolutely. So tremendous terror.
How the patients, and just a personal question, that you practiced emergency medicine where I know where somebody came in, they were hurt, and you could fix them and take care of things immediately in the emergency room, and it was on to the next patient. Now to take on a patient like myself who would be so slow and for years and years and maybe and not even make it. I know the statistics, and I know that you know that I'm rare.
Well, you are rare, but again, I think you're rarer because the treatment hasn't been out there for people. I think, again, if we can try to get this message out to people where they understand that they don't have to be the rare exception to be sober, they can be sober by doing the right sorts of things. And family members can get healing if they will do the right sorts of things. Again, I don't know who we're going to touch out there, but my hope is that these people who are hearing what we're talking about will begin to explore the possibility of getting sane, sober, serene, all the things that 12-step recovery offers them.
You are listening to Trudge the Road.
You've been listening to Trudge the Road, brought to you by Live livefrogged.com, which stands for firmly relying on God's grace every day. That's livefrogged.com. Thanks for listening, and join us next week for another edition of Trudge the Road on this great radio station. And remember to keep trudging the road to a happy destiny.